Yes. On behalf of the whole congregation, we are so delighted to have you here and so grateful that you have joined us.
Oh,
so thank you so much. We had this tradition we've had for a few years where we have done some interviewing. We thought that wouldn't it be nice to get to know Pastor Evelyn in a little bit more detail by going through the same process with her. It's not the hot seat. We talked a few days ago about some rough questions, but I think we're just going to take it where it goes. And we have a limited amount of time, as you mentioned before, but really this is just for us to get to know you a bit more and for you to share a bit more that we glean from your sermons, but now we can ask it in a little different way. So the way that we have typically started off these sessions is to talk a little bit about your religious, spiritual background. When you're a child, how did that form? How did you grow up? And how does that inform you now in terms of your current belief systems? And I know that you were born and raised Catholic. I can very much relate with that. A few members of our church can also relate with that. So please tell us a little bit more about how you grew up and what your traditions were.
I would say the first story I remember my grandmother telling me was, because I wouldn't go take a nap and she's trying to get me down, was the story of our La Virgen de Guadalupe, the Virgin of Guadalupe, and the roses and the tilde and Juan Diego. And I couldn't go to sleep because I wanted to hear the rest of the story. So that was not a good plan on her part. But the whole idea of being raised Catholic in a very Mexican-American culture in the mountains of northern New Mexico, I think is Catholic was what you were. Everybody else was something different. So when I went to school, I did have Jewish friends. I have a friend that was very dear since elementary school, and we talk religion, and it was great. But that was your identity, and that's where you went after school, the catechism, and observed the seasons. And so, but also it was beautiful and a place to belong and a home, but also was my grandfather was a very strict Catholic, very strict. And it just there wasn't any room to grow in that. And so my mother's attitude was, and she just sat us down one time, she goes, "It's my job to take you to church every Sunday until you're 18. And then whatever you do after that is up to you." So you couldn't even fake being sick because you're on your way to church. And so,
exactly.
Make the sign of the cross as we pass the church and all of that. So when I turned 18 and went off to college, I kind of dropped out and then returned when I returned and was working in town. And my mentor is still is a Catholic priest. He's 90, Father Brown, Charlie Brown, in Albuquerque, and we go to lunch every time I go back. So it's a big part of me, but it's not the box that I thought it was when I was growing up. So spiritually, that was, the idea of pilgrimage was a big part. El Santuario was the place in Chimayo. If you've never been to New Mexico, it's 40,000 pilgrims walk there on Good Friday. The Holy Dirt, I think before the pandemic, there'd be like 30 tons of dirt was taken out every year. The priests bless it and put it in this little hole, and you take it home and it's blessed. And so you can bless your home, your gardens. They take the water and bless people, anoint them. And it's believed to be the place of many, many miracles. And so whenever somebody was sick in the family and my mother would be praying, because she was deeply religious, she would make a promise to God, if they get well, I'm walking to Chimayo. And then she didn't want to walk alone, so Evelyn's walking with me. So her dad would drive down about 8 miles from the church. "We'll see you later." and we trudge off. And so there was a lot of praying, a lot of activity, a lot of time in church, a lot of candles and incense and all that stuff I really like. And
all the ritual, right? That's
all
what
the
I remember.
ritual.
And it's really hard not to feel that. And
Right.
sometimes I wonder, more ritual, why not? Right here, because I think it is kind of a fun thing. So you went to school close by in New Mexico, or did you go far away?
For undergrad, I went to the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, and that's where Tony Hillerman was the chairman of the journalism department. I happened to take an elective, and then that became my major because he was very encouraging. And so I became a journalist. I worked for as an assistant press secretary to then Senator Pete Domenici from New Mexico in DC, and then went back and ended up working in Los Alamos, my hometown, as a beat reporter, because the editor at that time was somebody I knew from college. And so he called up and says, I hear you're in town. You want a job? I said, sure. Show up tomorrow. Okay. This was back before they did all the background checks and made you pee in the cup. So, but so that turned into, I went from beat reporter to sports editor to, and if you know anybody in journalism and they're a girl and they want to move up into management, they need to get some sports experience, because all the men read the sports pages. And so your byline is there. And that's what my publisher said, you've got to do sports. I did that for 3 years. I didn't know a darn thing. I mean, baseball, I love baseball. Baseball, that was, I said, fine for the summer. But we got to football, I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I was watching, films with the guys. The coach was really mad, and he says, when are you going to do a preview of the season? I said, well, when are you going to win a game? I said, you guys are in such bad shape, I could beat you. So I suited up and they beat me. I was just George Plimpton.
So that's quite a, after journalism, what was then the transition to your religious or spiritual? So that's quite a transition. Tell us more about how that happened and kind of what were the circumstances that led you to a new direction.
So I became editor and publisher of the paper and did that for 10 years. And it was the time of Reagan and the beginning of the moral majority. And and we were a Republican stronghold in a very democratic state. It was everybody was a Republican except apparently me. And so whenever we'd write something about, Reagan's policies or whatever, they'd come, and tell me off. And or anything, pro-choice, they'd cancel the subscriptions. And the circulation manager taught me something. They'd call and tell me off, cancel my subscription. I'd be glad to. I'd write it all down. And she'd cancel them for a month and then start them up again. And they're just mad. They'll get over it. So, if you cancel something and it keeps coming back, she's probably working for them.
Right.
So anyway, it was the religious wars were going on. We had a huge fight in town with, the first thing, it was clear I needed to move on. The legislature took up the gay rights bill, and it actually took 10 years before they approved it. And so a woman came in and said, you need to support it. And I said, are you nuts? This is a Republican town. She goes, well, I'll read this. And I'm like, oh. So I read it and I went, oh. So we did a really mild support. Well, it was just us and Taos, and all hell broke loose. And I mean, people were just telling me, nobody would sit with me at church. Nobody would sit with me at coffee and donuts. And the mail carrier came in with this bag of letters to the editor back when people actually mailed letters, dumped it on my desk and said, don't you ever do that again. Okay. So And then we voted against Indian gaming. We were the only county in the state to do that because I thought it was a bad idea, and we lost a huge contract. And then the Wiccans came in and they said, we want to be on the church page. I said, you're not a church. And so they went away, and I thought, oh, phew. Come back. They said, we had a meeting and we've renamed ourselves Our Lady of the Woods Church of Wicca. Like, oh no. So they went on the church page, and oh my God, the letters, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. It says in Deuteronomy, da 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 da. And anyway, it was a mess. So I told the Wiccans, you know, I'm kind of the Walking Dead. We've had the gay rights bill. I'm beat up on that. I'm beat up on the Indian gaming, but I'll give you whatever room you need to defend yourself. And so it was hammer and tongs. And one woman, I went to an arts and crafts fair, and this lady pulls me aside and she goes, you know what? I really feel sorry for the witches. So it was good. So anyway, it was clear then I needed to, what I wanted to do was become a religion writer. I wanted to explore those conflicts and why they're so deep. And I think, you know, newspapers and much of the media have given up on that, and it's unfortunate because we do shorthand. That's why I feel necessary to say the Gospel of John has been used in this way, but it's not, we need not do that. So we need to be aware of it. So that's how I ended up at PSR, Pacific School of Religion in Berkeley. I had done my master's at St. John's College in the Great Books program, and that was really fun. That was, it was intense. And so I thought, well, this will be a natural thing to do it. But then so I thought, well, I'll get an MDiv, and you have to do a year of internship. So I ended up in the Tenderloin in San Francisco, working at a halfway house for men and women coming out of federal prison. And Dora Ford was my mentor there, and that's how I ended up going to work at the jails. And then I was still not committed to the UCC, so I understand it when people say, yeah, you know, but so I went, after 3 years in the jail, they said, you really do need to be ordained. You need to be ordained. And I was a member at Foothills Congregational Church in Los Altos. And the pastor there, Matt Broadbent, said, well, I'll help you, you know. So that's how that came about. I ended up getting ordained and had good friends already. Kim Smith Nielsen, as the Nightingales know, was a dear friend from my hometown. And so she was very supportive. So it's been a journey. It hasn't, you know, everybody goes, oh, did God call you and you just took the freeway there? Well, God called, and I kept tucking behind every tree I could find.
So you talk in your sermons and just now about jails and about being in jail. And I think that is such a intriguing, deep thought about what is it actually like to lose your freedoms and to be there. What would you say it was like as a person that is incarcerated, or you being in those situations? What did you take away from that?
Oh, there's so many things that I took away, and I'm kind of hoping I can started a book, and I'm working with the former head of mental health to do something on that. There's so many people who don't belong in jail, but we don't know what to do with them. What happens to all the kids who drop out of high school, right? Or who come home and take care of their parents and then have no job skills, or live, you know, or their wife leaves them and they go out on a bender and they get in a wreck, you know, or they're mentally ill. You know, a couple of them are, you know, the best thing I think two things I really appreciated from that was we had an acute psychiatric unit at the jail, and a friend and I would take Bible studies in once a week. and we'd be out in the main room so they could watch us. And it was, the insights were profound. I always had the guys read the scripture. I didn't want to read it. They should read it because they need to practice. And one guy, he could barely read, so we'd make just a sentence. And he, for God. So, and I had a friend with me, one of the other chaplains, and she's like, "What are you doing? How are you letting him read?" I said, "Shut up." And so he finished, he got through that, and everybody's clapping. "Way to go, bro. Way to go. That was a great job." Because the guys really, they see the weakness, the brokenness in each other, and they encourage one another. So yeah, there's some people you don't reach, and some that I remember. I was downtown San Jose, and it was raining, and I ducked into some little dumpy restaurant there. I thought, well, I'll have lunch and wait out the rain. And as I walked in, some guy goes, "Hey, chaplain, how you doing?" I went, "Oh dear." Now I only hear that from a few places, and I went, "Fine, how are you?" He goes, "You remember me?" And I'm like, "Oh no." I said, "Well, where were you?" He goes, "7th floor." I went, "Oh." Okay. That was the floor for the prison people who'd had prison experience, who didn't rape anybody or anything like that, but armed robbery, that kind of stuff, murder maybe. But he's sitting there and he's eating lunch, and we started talking. I said, "How's it going with you?" He says, "We used to come in and tell us we can just change our life a little bit. We won't end up in the same place. If we just make a little bit of a turn, we'll end up somewhere else." So I came out, he got out, he found a little apartment downtown that he could afford. He found a job part-time. He could walk to his daughter and son-in-law's house he would walk there every morning, have breakfast with the family, and take his grandkids to school, walk them to school, go to work. He was on his lunch break, finish his job, walk to school, and walk his grandkids home and stay for dinner. He said his life turned completely around. And I carry that story with me. I can't remember his name, but I think we can change and life can be better. And I think, boy, and he was a big guy, I thought his grandkids are all proud. Don't mess with me. And so he was just so happy. He worked at a warehouse and probably made a little over minimum wage, right, but he could have a place to live and people who loved him. And that was profound. So wow, when you see that, a couple of them, it just fuels you forever.
Wow. Well, I look forward to seeing your book, because I think we could spend a lot of time just in this realm, and I know you weave it into your sermons, and I just think what an extraordinary experience. When you mentioned that, I thought a little bit about, this is our Maple Street Sunday. That's a little bit of what I feel, right? There, but for the grace of God, go I. These people are there. They're not incarcerated, but they're struggling, they're suffering, and it's just because of a couple of things. That they don't have a family that they can rely upon. There's addiction that could be involved, in just some dumb luck. And you sit there and go, if you can just spend time with them and just be with them, it's such a gift. And it took me a while to feel like I could do that, just genuinely. So those of you that haven't experienced Maple Street Navigation Center, it's a little bit of a plug for that. But I think in a little way that does touch people that are really suffering, and really a little bit of comments. You may not think it's a big deal, but it stays with people. So
it does.
So
you're blessed.
So I wanted to move on a little bit with kind of what brought you to the church. And when we talk to members, we have a story. It was a conversation with the team that said, "Would you be our bridge pastor?" And you said yes. But you have a longer history with the church. And maybe you could just explain a little bit about what that history was, and just people may or may not recall this in terms of your connection with Ladera in the past, and now it's come to this role.
So one of the reasons I really considered this was because when the Rows were members here, Dick Rowe and his wife, I often did a pulpit supply and at this church. And when Lindsay was here, I think I filled in, maybe she was on sabbatical or something. I filled in several Sundays. So I had a sense of the church and the people in it, and it was always a pretty good feeling that you guys are upright folks. So that's why I was really happy to get the call.
And you had met with, you've been connected with other people besides Dick that you've known here as well, right?
Melanie Wiener was your associate
Right,
pastor,
right.
and she's a dear friend of mine. We spent Super Bowl Sunday over at her place, eating all her ribs and groaning.
And groaning, yes, that was a groaner. That was a groaner. So I know that Rover's giving us we're out of time, but I want to, one quick question that kind of looks to who you are as a person and kind of ahead is, what brings you joy?
Oh, gosh, so many things. I think walking in the park, taking the dog, well, my dog is 17 now and blind, so those are much shorter walks, but getting out into nature is really one of them. Reading a good novel, reading a good book will do that. Last night I had dinner with friends. That was fun. Mm-hmm. So different things, I guess meeting people and being with people, and I'm a lot more extroverted than a lot of folks who are, and that was actually a hindrance when I was going through the psychological exam for ordination, because she said your profile is completely opposite of most pastors. You're going to have a little trouble in a church, and so chaplaincy, and most of it was, most pastors, if you know them, are pretty introverted, right? Intuitive, feeling,
right?
And you're
out there.